Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay, here to talk about the newest news as far as professional wrestling is concerned. Cody Rhodes. We know that Cody Rhodes now is once again the WWE champion for the third time now. He is the three-time WWE champion. Man, I remember when I was a kid, being a three-time champion was a big thing. You know what I mean? Like, um, if you won the championship for three times, you've been in the game for years, right? The first three-time champion that I remember was Hulk Hogan when he won the WWF Championship in 1991 from Sergeant Slaughter. But now, three times ain't nothing. You know, title wins are like inflation. What used to mean a lot now means less over time. But anyway, so we now have our main event for WrestleMania 42 in Las Vegas for the WWE Championship. Cody Rhodes versus his former legacy tag team his legacy stablemate, Randy Orton. Now, this one has a story already built into it because much like Randy Orton when he was in Legacy in 2009, and he was going against his former stablemate and mentor, Triple H, at WrestleMania 25. You, you, you know what I mean? And it was like Randy Orton was growing up, and Randy Orton was once a child, and then the young lion challenging the old lion. At that time, Randy Orton was the old lion the young lion challenging the old lion, Triple H, who was his mentor. I always say it's like this. Um, Kurt Hennig mentors Shawn Michaels, becomes Shawn Michaels' mentor as Shawn Michaels goes into singles competition, comes into the WWF, and basically Kurt Hennig mentored the entire clique. Then from there, Shawn Michaels mentors Triple H. Kurt Hennig had some dealings with that too right before he left in '96. From there, uh, Triple H goes on to mentor Randy Orton, and then Randy Orton goes on to mentor Cody Rhodes. In the future, if Cody Rhodes ever turns heel, he will have somebody too that he will mentor and he will guide and he will mold, and eventually that person will go on to face him. So that's the circle of life in professional wrestling. And that's what we're going to see WrestleMania 42. Now, this will probably be the main event for night two, I think, because I don't know if they'll let CM Punk go on last. They should, because everybody last year, last year, everybody clowned CM Punk because the whole reason why CM Punk came back to the WWE, left the WWE in 2014 and came back to the WWE in 2023 was because he never got to main event at WrestleMania. He did a double main event at WrestleMania 29 in 2013 with The Undertaker, but he had to take a back seat to Rock versus Cena too. Then he comes back and he finally gets the quote unquote main event at WrestleMania 41 last year, but it's night one. Night one really doesn't count, guys. Night one is the semi-main. The main event for night one is the semi-main event. The real main event is the match, and CM Punk even said this too. This is why CM Punk didn't want to work with Triple H at WrestleMania 30 in 2014. Remember, he said it too. The main event is the match that goes on last, right? That's the main event. Since 2020, they've been doing the two-night shows, and you have a two-night main event and a one-night main event. But let's be real. The forever it's been like this at a wrestling show. The last image you see is the true main event. So if Cody Rhodes versus Randy Orton is the main event, The last match at WrestleMania 42 on April 19th, 2026. That's the real main event, guys, not CM Punk versus Roman Reigns. Also, we have our women's match set up. You have Jade Cargill defending the WWE Championship against the Elimination Chamber winner Rhea Ripley. So they're putting the tag team of Rhea Ripley and Io Sky on hold, and Rhea Ripley's going for the gold there. And of course, we know Liv Morgan already made her choice with Stephanie Vaquer for the Raw Women's Championship. So those are the 4 matches that they have set thus far. I would like to see Lash Legend and Nia Jax defend the tag team championships against somebody, probably Alexa and Charlotte. Maybe, or Gianna James and Julia, maybe. We got to see. Trick Williams has been getting a lot of traction. I don't know who he'll be facing at WrestleMania. Some say Sami Zayn. So obviously my prediction for Sami Zayn going on to win the WWE Championship or fight for the WWE Championship or the World Heavyweight Championship at a WrestleMania did not come true. He didn't win He didn't win the Royal Rumble, and he didn't win Elimination Chamber. But there's been a lot, and Randy Orton, basically had a talk with him and saying that he's just too nice. That Sami Zayn needs to be a little bit more vicious, a little bit more cunning, a little bit more backstabbing. Randy Orton had that talk with him. So maybe, we'll start to see a more vicious streak from Sami as he goes to WrestleMania and possibly facing Trick Williams. We got to see. Brock Lesnar, they're hyping up Brock Lesnar. A couple weeks ago on Raw, Brock Lesnar came out. Him and Paul Heyman challenged anybody and everybody. So people are saying possibly Obafemi, possibly Powerhouse Hobbs. I forget his name. Powerhouse Hobbs' name in WWE always escapes me. It's some stupid name that they that they gave him when he made the jump. Royce Keys possibly against Brock Lesnar, or Obafemi against Brock Lesnar. So we will see who Brock Lesnar will be facing. They're making facing Brock Lesnar like this big thing now at WrestleMania since he's come back. You know what I mean? So that's a possible match set. So it could be Kiana James and Julia against Nia Jax and Lash Legend for the tag team championships, women's tag team championships. I don't think the Usos are going to take on anybody at WrestleMania, but we got to see. We still got a lot of weeks. So what I wanted to talk about, we still got 8 weeks, I think, or 6 to 8 weeks till WrestleMania. What I wanted to talk about was the reaction online that many of the IWC fans are having towards Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes, now that he's the WWE champion again, and we don't know who Gunther is going to face either. You know what I'm saying? We don't know who Gunther is going to face. Gunther had a lot of steam. He retired John Cena. He retired AJ Styles. He has a lot of steam on him. He's this legend killer. He's the new legend killer. Possibly he could be the one to take out Randy Orton. They're probably going to. The thing about this Randy Orton Cody Rhodes feud is it's so predictable. We know Cody's walking out as champion because Randy is old. I feel myself getting old because I remember when Randy Orton debuted in the WWE in 2002. Before he was with Evolution, right? When he first came out. And I was like, cool, because I always kind of, when I was a kid and I would rent these videos from these wrestling tapes from Blockbuster, and I would watch his father, Cowboy Bob. And I always kind of liked his dad as a wrestler, right? So when he came out, I'm like, okay, cool. He's like his dad, but he's more dynamic. And he had the RKO, which was a cool move. The Ace Crusher was cool when Johnny Ace did it in Japan. Of course, I knew it most from Diamond Dallas Page doing it in WCW in the 90s. So I liked him, and then, he was in 2009 hits. And by 2009, he reached his stride. That feud with Triple H was tremendous. The match fell flat because of Shawn Michaels and Undertaker. They outshunned them, right, at WrestleMania 25. But it was a great feud. I know David, he didn't like 09 Randy Orton. He didn't like Legacy Randy Orton. Me, I did. So, I always liked Randy Orton, right? Always felt like out of the four OVW class of, everybody talks about the OVW class of 2002. Brock Lesnar, Batista, John Cena, and Randy Orton. Out of those four, Randy Orton was the one who stood around. Randy Orton was the one who stood in WWE, stood loyal to the wrestling business, and stood around and put the work in. Batista left to Hollywood. John Cena left to Hollywood, and Brock Lesnar left to the UFC for a while. Right? But out of the four, Randy Orton stood loyal. But man, if I'm Ted DiBiase Jr., I got to be looking at myself and kicking myself in the ass because, yeah, David did call it. Yes, David, I forgot that. David, thank you for reminding me. I forgot that Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes was what David predicted months ago. David was right on the money with that. But Ted DiBiase Jr., he got to be kicking himself in the ass because as his former stablemates, Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton, go to face each other at WrestleMania this year, he is possibly sitting in a jail cell involved in the scandal with his dad with the welfare checks in Mississippi. Right? So, and it's funny because when they started Legacy in 2009, everybody, WWE themselves, were saying that Ted DiBiase was going to be, he's just like his dad. He was gonna be. Yeah. Not a has been, not a never was. He's a never was. He was going to be. Ted DiBiase was going to be. Ted DiBiase Sr., $1 Million Man. He was going to be the NWA champion, right? He was going to be the WWF champion in 1988. Ted DiBiase Jr., the son, he was going to be the biggest star. He was the one that was put in the Marines. The movie, right? The movie franchise. He was put in the Marine. He was the one that WWE was. He was the golden boy. Cody wasn't the golden boy. Out of Legacy, they assumed that Ted DiBiase was going to be the star, right? Ted DiBiase was going to be the guy that came out of Legacy, and he was going to be the huge star. Now Ted DiBiase is sitting in jail, and Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton are main event in WrestleMania. Life takes funny turns, as it were, right? You never really know in this crazy business of professional wrestling, where you can't really call it who's going to be the star of what, because sometimes you get a faction like the Shield where they're all stars. Mox is a star, Roman Reigns is a star, Seth Rollins is a star. And that's another match that's probably set for WrestleMania. Seth Rollins versus Braun Breaker. Right? You get a faction like that, and they all come out stars. Even the Nation of Domination, The Rock came out the biggest one, but really they were all. D'Lo came out as a star, as the Godfather. They all really came out stars. But the legacy, like I said, they believed that Ted DiBiase was gonna be. Yeah, I believe that too, David. Yeah, they believed that Ted DiBiase was gonna be the guy, and look at him now. He's sitting in he's sitting in a jail cell while his two stablemates main event WrestleMania. What an amazing story. Cody was the underdog. Nobody was pulling for Cody. Probably his dad was. Dusty was. You know what I'm saying? But nobody. I didn't think he was gonna ever be a big star because here's a guy, Cody Rhodes. People forget his first because he's such a mega star since he came back, right, in 2022, that people forget his first run. He was hard, like he had some really shitty gimmicks. You know, after Legacy, this was after Legacy broke up in 2010. Right? He had some really shitty gimmicks, and he was really off to a rough start. Him and Drew McIntyre were champions, but you know, dashing Cody Rhodes, him and Damian Sandow, the Rhodes Scholars. You know what I mean? And of course Stardust. You know what I mean? But now it's like, okay, what about Drew? Why did Drew win the WWE Championship in the first place? Why not just keep it on Cody? Like, it just seems like that was pretty much. Yeah, he should have. He quit the business, you know what I mean? And he went to go preach and commit welfare fraud with his dad's ministry. You know what I mean? But you know, he had talent, but you know, Cody obviously was the star of that group. I think it's so like again, my question, what happened to Drew? You know what I'm saying? Like what are they gonna do with Drew now? You know what I mean? Like now Drew McIntyre uh he won the championship in Berlin for nothing really. You know, he's not gonna be included in the main event. Some people say he's gonna take on Fatu uh at WrestleMania. So what do you think about that, David? Do you think that Drew McIntyre, who do you think he's going to wrestle at WrestleMania? I think Jacob Fatu is probably the best bet for him. But what about Danhausen? What about Danhausen in WWE now? He ended up being the box surprise at Elimination Chamber. We didn't talk about that, but he ended up being the surprise for weeks and weeks. You know, Adam Pearce was showing this box of this surprise person that was coming over, and it ended up being Danhausen. And many people said, "Oh, and I forgot another match that's set. I think for WrestleMania, AJ Lee probably gonna defend. AJ Lee won the Intercontinental Championship, obviously at Elimination Chamber from Becky Lynch. So she's gonna probably uh, she's gonna probably defend the championship against Becky Lynch in a rematch at WrestleMania. And like I said, her husband, Becky Lynch's husband, Seth Rollins, is probably going to take on Braun Breaker because he was revealed as the Masked Man. So the two surprises, Danhausen was in the box, and Seth Rollins was the surprise Masked Man that attacked Braun Breaker at the Royal Rumble, eliminating Braun. So, we're on the road to WrestleMania. The storylines are coming into place, falling into place. With regards to that, we still don't know who Drew McIntyre is going to face. We still don't know who Gunther is going to face. But pretty much everybody that's anybody in the cards is going to have, some sort of a match coming up. So WrestleMania 42, a lot of people don't like the hype for it. I think the hype is kind of lame. But I just don't like that WrestleMania is in the middle of April nowadays. You know what I'm saying? It used to be, late March, early April, and we'd already, now since last year, like they pushed WrestleMania uh, all the way back, to the middle of April. I don't know what next year. Next year, weather is not going to be an issue. I don't even know next year. It's supposed to be in Saudi Arabia, Saudi Mania. With all that's going on right now with Iran and the United States and Israel and all the Gulf Khaliji countries, Iran just got their new supreme leaders replaced. Ali Khamenei obviously was assassinated, killed in that airstrike by Donald Trump and the United States and Israel, the American-Israeli coalition. So Mujtaba Khomeini, his son, is now his successor. You know what I mean? But so I guess he's kind of like Ted DiBiase Jr. No, right? A corrupt cleric in another religion, but he's taken over, and they say that he's more hardliner than Trump. So, than his dad. So against like Trump and Netanyahu. So if this conflict in the Middle East continues, and continues to escalate with, between the United States, Israel, and Iran, this three-way conflict, it may be some issues, with WrestleMania next year. So they may, just like they were supposed to have it in New Orleans this year, and they moved it in the middle of it to Vegas, right? They may have to move it from Saudi Arabia back to Vegas again if things don't smooth over with regards to the Middle East. Now, anything can happen between now and then because, it's unpredictable. There could suddenly be a burst of freedom in Iran and the Shah could return. And things could go well in the Middle East. Just a sudden burst of freedom within the Middle East. Within the Middle Eastern nations, and WWE's good to go to the Middle East next year. That's 2027. But as far as 2026, you know what I mean? We're on the road to rest. Oh man, David, music to my ears. David says WrestleMania 43 needs to move to Brooklyn, New York. David, I would love that, man. I'm from Brooklyn. I'm a Brooklyn native. I would love to have a WrestleMania here in Brooklyn. We've never had it. You know what I'm saying? I've been to 3. Obviously, in New York City, and 2 in the Madison Square Garden and 1 in MetLife Stadium, 2004 and 1994 in Madison Square Garden, and 2013 in MetLife Stadium. And they've had 4 wrestling. No, I'm a Rangers fan. I'm a Rangers fan, David. But I met a lot of Islanders. In my school, I went to school on Long Island. So, yeah. I went to school on Long Island, and the Islanders, they used to visit our school, and they would play us in a charity hockey game. But I'm a Rangers fan. I've been a Rangers fan since 1994 when the Rangers broke the curse and won the Stanley Cup. I was 9 years old, going on 10, and everybody was obsessed with the Rangers at that time. Mark Messier was on the team, and I've been a Rangers fan ever since. You know what I mean? So, like I said, they have 4 WrestleManias in the New York City, New Jersey, tri-state area, and I went to 3 out of the 4. I did not go to WrestleMania 35 in 2019. But David is correct. Barclays, I would love that, man. But unfortunately, David, I don't see that happening. From your mouth to God's ears, and from your mouth to Ari Emanuel's ears, and Nick Khan and Paul Levesque, you know what I mean? I would love to see that. You know what I'm saying? The WWE in Brooklyn. You know what I mean? WrestleMania, but the tickets will be crazy. But I'll find a way. You know what I mean? I'm heavily plugged into radio and media and stuff through my work. You know what I mean? By that time, especially. You know what I'm saying? So if it were ever to come to New York, I'd find a way. But unfortunately, I don't think, that's going to be, because, ever since WrestleMania 23, ever since 2007, they've done stadium shows. The last arena WrestleMania they did was 2006, 20 years ago. You know what I'm saying? And for the past 20 years, they've done stadium shows. You know what I mean? So I don't see that happening. Maybe the MetLife Stadium. I would try to get there somehow. Again, like I did in 2013. So, but I would love to see another WrestleMania come to the New York City area. To me, that's the home of the WWE. That's where WWE started. That's where the first WrestleMania started. That's where WrestleMania 20 was. That's where WrestleMania 10 was. That's where WrestleMania 1 was. The New York City area. Never in Brooklyn, because obviously a stadium in Brooklyn didn't exist. An arena in Brooklyn didn't exist until much, much later. But they did have WrestleMania 2 partially in the Nassau Coliseum. But I was only WrestleMania 2. I was only 1.5 years old. 1.5 years old, and I wasn't watching wrestling at that time, so I didn't get to go to that. But I did get to one time go to a show in the Nassau Coliseum with a friend in 1997. When the old Nassau Coliseum was there. So it wasn't a WrestleMania, it was a house show. I would have loved to have one wrestling event that was in my area in New York, well, not in New York City, but on Long Island. That I would have loved to go have been at, but I wasn't there. but the crowd was crazy that night because I was watching it I watched it on pay-per-view was SummerSlam 2002. Uh, SummerSlam 2002 is probably uh, uh, one of my favorite SummerSlams. You know, Brock Lesnar versus The Rock. Um, where Brock Lesnar wins his first WWE Championship. Shawn Michaels' return to the ring, taking on Triple H in the unsanctioned street fight. Um, just amazing stuff. I wish I'd have been there, man. That night. But I do love that WrestleMania. Matt Hardy versus Rey Mysterio. One day. One day we definitely have to review that one, David. SummerSlam '02, SummerSlam '02, SummerSlam 1992. But I say this: if David is, besides David's suggestion, if they're still going to want to have it of their first WrestleMania overseas, London has to be the place. London, you know what I mean? London has to be. They have to do London. If they still want to do it overseas. When they announced Saudi Arabia, I'm like, why Saudi Arabia? Like we saw at the Royal Rumble, the Saudi crowd, they didn't react to anything. And then if they do WrestleMania and they continue to go through a WrestleMania 43 in Saudi, the women are going to have to wear those ugly ass suits that they wore for the Women's Royal Rumble this past year. You know what I mean? And I didn't care for those. I thought those were atrocious. Obviously, the laws in Saudi Arabia, Salafi Islam, strict Muslim laws, kind of like Iran. It's funny because, again, going off topic, but about politics, it's funny that the United States criticizes people in the Trump administration. They're like, oh, Khamenei was a brutal dictator, right? This regime that has existed for 40 plus years, in Iran, since 1979, since the Islamic Revolution, right? But the country that we're closely aligned with, Saudi Arabia, does the same thing. You know what I'm saying? Like they're the Sunni version of the IGC in Iran. The IRGC. Sorry, they're the Sunni version of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard in Iran, right? They're just Sunnis, and then the Iranians are Shia. They're like two different branches of radical Islam. And it's just like when we were going against the Sunnis, right? When we were going against ISIS, or we were going against uh, when we were going against ISIS, and then before that, Al Qaeda in the 2000s, right? The war on terror years. It's like here you are talking about how bad radical Islam is. A book every other month coming out about radical Islam and how bad radical Islam is and political Islam. But at the same time, you're allies with Saudi Arabia. It kind of makes you look hypocritical. But hey, that's the United States. That's, our foreign policy was always kind of like that. You know what I'm saying? Like we would in the Cold War, the entire Cold War, we're beating a drum of how bad Marxism and Leninism and socialism is with regards to Russia, but we're aligned with China. The other big communist, Leninist, Marxist um, regime in the region. In that part of like northern Asia, northern Eurasia. It never made sense to me. You know what I mean? Like we cut Cuba off because Cuba becomes communist, but we're allies with China. You know what I'm saying? And later on, after the war, we became allies with Vietnam. So, like, Saudi Arabia is the exact same thing, and the Saudi regime is older. They've been practicing or they've been imposing Islamic Sharia on their people for longer. Now, granted, in 2018, when Mohammed bin Salman came into power, and he became the new crown prince of Saudi Arabia. Of course, he's the one that he works heavily with WWE and TKO. Turk Al-Sheikh, the guy who's involved with TKO, involved with the MMA organization, involved with the boxing, involved with the wrestling, right? The Vision 2030 deal with MBS. He's a reformer. He's trying to introduce reforms to liberalize Saudi Arabia. So he gets points for that in my book, right? Because so if you compare him to like somebody within the Soviet Union, he is sort of like Mikhail Gorbachev, right? With perestroika and glasnost, introducing these reforms to try to liberalize the country. So he gets points for that in my book. Good for him. Kudos for him. And it's because of him that WWE and Saudi Arabia have been doing business for this long, or WWE. I mean, boxing promotions like Bob Abrams promotion or whatever. They're hosting like Tyson versus Francis Ngannou and stuff in Saudi Arabia, and they're hosting FIFA in Saudi Arabia. So it's because of him that they've been doing a lot of good things with Saudi Arabia and getting a lot of money that does not have to do with oil or have to do with Hajj. Hajj related tourism, but at the same time, they're still basically, they still chop your hand off for stealing. They still, women still have, they're still a pretty regressive country. They have a long way to go. They get an E for effort for trying, but they still have a very long way to go. And I think the United States kind of looks at it like, sort of like how they looked at it with regards to opening diplomatic relations with China in the 70s, or opening up, with the Soviet Union during the détente period. They kind of look at it like, okay, well, if we cut them off completely and we put like an iron curtain between them, we cut them off diplomatically completely, then we can't work with them. And kind of Trump was doing the same thing kind of with North Korea in 2018. But if that's the case, okay, then how come when Obama was trying to do that with regards to Iran, people criticized Obama? And again, this is going off topic in a way, way off topic, but it's kind of related because we're talking about the future of WWE and the future, with how WrestleMania 43 is going to turn out, in Saudi Arabia next year, and just their relationship with Saudi Arabia that still has a few more years left on it. 2030 is when it's up, and plus, I don't know how true it is. This rumor is unsubstantiated, but Jonathan Coachman has been coming on saying that Vince McMahon, now the Janelle Grant situation is probably blown over with regards to Vince, that he's going to try to purchase, use a Saudi investor to try to repurchase WWE from TKO. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. You know what I'm saying? Like, that may not even be a thing. Vince McMahon, he's old. He just got, they released the videos of Vince in that car accident the day that Hulk Hogan died, and it was pretty brutal. So that may not happen, but it's just related to WWE and their dealings with Saudi Arabia and stuff. But as far as this Iran thing, I'm really praying for uh, Iran. That they turn it around, and maybe one day, liberalism and democracy comes to the Iranians, and they'll be able to do business too with WWE. Maybe, you know, the culture will completely change with regards to Iran, and that'll open up another Middle Eastern avenue for WWE, because WWE has always kind of done business in the Middle East. You know, a huge following. I remember the Kuwaiti Cup. In the mid '90s when Ahmed Johnson won it and Tiger Ali Singh, won it, and they did the headlock for hunger um, uh, for the war in Somalia in '93. So they've always kind of uh, you know, been pretty good at doing business in that part of the world, because wrestling is hugely popular in that part of the world. And in that part of the world, in the Middle East, wrestling is deeply embedded in them. Like, there's even a hadith where Muhammad himself loved to wrestle. And obviously, it's not professional wrestling, it's more like amateur wrestling. But Umar ibn al Khattab, the second caliph in the history of Islam, was also a wrestler. You know what I mean? So wrestling is something deeply embedded, and you see how they react to people like Khabib, people like Islam Makhachev, people like uh, Murad Duhashvili, you know, Muslim fighters within the UFC. So, and they're always having these grappling tournaments in places like Abu Dhabi, and Dana White has in 2020. Dana White had Fight Island in Abu Dhabi. You know what I mean? So um, WWE and UFC, the TKO organization, deep business within the Middle East. They're starved for sports. They don't really have sports other than soccer. You know what I mean? So, uh, um, you know, that's how that kind of relates. And it intersects with me, because you're talking about my two favorite topics in the world: geopolitics, especially as it pertains to the Middle East, and professional wrestling. So next year is going to be making a lot of more videos if WWE remains doing uh, the uh, the WrestleMania in Riyadh. But for now, we have the other desert, Las Vegas, coming up. So that's the big match, Legacy. And notice when Cody won, he did a shout out to the Bullet Club. He shout out the Bullet Club. He shout out kind of Kenny Omega in a way. Could Kenny Omega one day make the jump to WWE? What do you guys think? Peace. Love you guys. Thank you, David, for contributing.